Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 361 for the 24th of Cheshvan in a leap year. So there's this idea in medicine, most commonly spoken about in more alternative circles of medicine these days, but it is starting to gain popularity in more mainstream circles as well, that the source of all illness is blockage, that there's some kind of blockage going on. And if we could remove that blockage, then the ailment would go away. We see this predominantly or most overtly in acupuncture. So of all the different types of alternative medicines, then acupuncture, I believe, is the one that's been studied the most and researched the most and been shown to be effective for treating many different ailments. And people have come up with all kinds of different theories as to why this might be. But the most common theory, and I believe the one that acupuncture itself, the tradition of acupuncture itself describes as being the accurate one, is that what acupuncture does is it opens up these blockages in the body, that there's this natural flow of energy that flows through the body, this vitality that flows through the body. And when there's a blockage to this energy flow, then this results in different kinds of disorders, different kinds of imbalances. So we want to restore that natural flow of energy. Nowadays, there's a pretty well-known physician who's becoming all the rage these days. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate. He wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, and he wrote a bunch of other books as well. I haven't yet read the book. I'm sure I'll talk about it once I do read the book. It sounds like it's totally up my alley, but I did hear a podcast with him where he was being interviewed, and he was saying a very similar thing, that in his experience being a medical doctor, and he really started out as being just a mainstream medical doctor, he started to notice the emotional components that seem to coincide very frequently with different medical disorders. And this really led him to really appreciate the connection between the minds and the body, and appreciate this idea that really parallels this idea again of that illness really is a representation of a certain blockage that's going on in the body. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is actually going to talk about. And he's going to talk about this in terms of the heart. I'm not a medical expert, nor do I claim to be. So I don't know how much of this parallels what modern mainstream medicine says about the workings of the heart in relation to the different organs of the body. But I can tell you guys what the Alter Rebbe says, which I know is truthful. And perhaps those of you with more of a medical background than I have can maybe explore this a little bit further to see how this does parallel what we know about the workings of the body. But so according to the Alter Rebbe describes that, and he says this very thing. He says that the source of all illnesses is a blockage, and it's specifically a blockage between the flow of vitality from the heart into the different organs of the body, so that in a healthy functioning body, the vitality is kind of based in the heart, and then it flows out to all the other limbs in the body and all the other organs in the body, and then it flows back to the heart. So there's this like very healthy cycle of vitality flowing through the body. But when there's some organ or some limb or something that's defective, God forbid, in some way, this stops the flow of vitality, the flow of blood from the heart, and it causes what we know of as illnesses, as different ailments. Now, why is the Alter Rebbe talking about all this? The Alter Rebbe was not a medical doctor, and what was this all about? So the Alter Rebbe describes all of this as a metaphor for actually our relationship as the Jewish people to each other and to God himself, as represented through the Shechina. through the divine indwelling, which we've talked about the Shechina many times on the podcast. And what he's going to describe here is that in this metaphor, in this illustration, in this case, the Shechina is the heart. The Shechina is the source of the vitality for all of us, and not only for all of us, but for the entire world. And the souls of the Jewish people in specific are the different limbs, are the different organs through which the vitality needs to flow through. And what this basically means is that we need to be unified. The basic message of this entire podcast is a really beautiful message. It's really all about loving your fellow Jew, because as the Alter Rebbe will describe, in order for there to be a healthy flow of vitality throughout the entire world, not just for Jews, not just for our souls, but literally to the entire world, it has to start with the Jews being unified. Because as we'll learn, the Jewish soul actually preceded creation. Because the Jewish soul was created through the thought of God, whereas the rest of creation was created through God's speech. And thought precedes speech. And it says that God actually consulted with the Jewish souls before creating the world. And so thus, since we are sort of like this primordial aspect of the world, we need to be unified. And if the souls are not unified, if there's any kind of discord in the souls of the Jewish people, this creates a blockage in the flow of vitality from the Shechina to the organs and ultimately to the rest of the world. Which is why we can come to understand that the destruction of the Second Temple, it's taught in Judaism at large that the reason for the destruction of the Second Temple was because of sinas chinam, it's called, for baseless hatred. And that this destruction of the Second Temple, what it did, spiritually speaking, is it actually caused the Shechina to be exiled. So with that being said, let's see how the Alter Rebbe goes through this. I'll lead you through this epistle, and we're going to be learning an entire epistle today. This is Epistle 31 of Iggeres HaKodesh, and so crazy, we are almost at the end of this Iggeres HaKodesh. This is the second to last epistle. So we have today, and then we have tomorrow. It's going to be the last epistle, and then we are done with the Iggeres HaKodesh, and then we're going to be starting the final book of the Tanya, the final sefer of Tanya, Kunstras Achram. So this is so exciting. Very amazing that we've made it this far. And so, so let's begin. So today, again, keeping this theme in mind, the Alter Rebbe begins this epistle in a very interesting way, which is particularly interesting when we contrast it with yesterday's epistle that we learned. So in yesterday's epistle, the epistle began with Moda'at Zot, which in Hebrew means it is known, like it is well known, meaning this is a well-known thing. And what we learned about yesterday was this idea of giving tzedakah and how you shouldn't ever diminish from the amount of or frequency with which you give tzedakah. So that's something that's a well-known thing. Today, however, it's a different wording. The beginning says Noda b'sha'arim. It is known in the gates. And what this is an allusion to is to the scholars and the judges, because they were the ones that back in the day, they used to sit at the city gates. So meaning to say that the point of this is that this is something that is, this teaching we're going to learn is something that's really known usually only in like very scholarly circles. But the Alter Rebbe is going to open it up and teach it to all of us and bring us into that world. So what is this thing that's known is the teaching of this idea from the Tikkunei Zohar that's part of the Kabbalah, the Tikkunei Zohar, that teaches that the Shechina is ailing in exile. The Shechina is sick in exile. So what does this mean? What does it mean that we say that the Shechina is sick? The Shechina is ailing in exile. How could the Shechina be sick? So the Alter Rebbe says, he brings this mashal, this parable of the body. So he says, of course, we have to say that, there's a very big difference between a body, a physical body, and holiness and the Shechina. Obviously, it's not the same thing at all, but we're just going to use this as a kind of illustration. So we know, as I explained in the introduction, that the whole that the reason for sickness and health has to do with the flow of vitality that goes from the heart to all of the different organs. So how does this work? So basically, what do we say when we say this vitality? What is this vitality? So this vitality that flows to all the different organs is vested within the blood of the soul that goes out from the heart to all of the different organs. And it circulates around the body And it brings this vitality through the blood. The blood is sort of like the transmitter of the vitality to all of the different organs, all the different limbs, all the different veins that are found within the body. And then it returns back to the heart. And so now, if this works properly, if this circulation happens in an appropriate manner, then everything is great. And we know that the person's totally healthy. This is a healthy individual. Their circulation is good, right? So all of the organs, all of the limbs, everything is receiving its appropriate circulation. It's receiving the vitality that it needs in order to function properly. However, if, God forbid, there's some type of disorder, if any part of the body, inside the body, has something in it that's not correct, that's not as it should be, this causes a blockage of the blood to flow through, and thus not only causing a blockage of the blood, but it causes a blockage in the vitality, meaning in the flow of vitality throughout the entire body, which causes a diminishment in this flow of vitality. And this results in, God forbid, God should save us from this. God forbid the person falling sick, the person becoming sick. So all of this is to serve as a metaphor for us to understand the concept that the Jewish people, the souls of the Jewish people, they're referred to as being the organs of the Shechina. Iggeres de Shechina. This is in the Zohar. They're called the organs of the Shechina. And the Shechina is called the heart. So we see different examples of this, that where the Shechina is called the heart. So for example, in Tehillim, chapter 73, verse 26, it says, V'tzur levavi, the rock, my heart, which is a reference to the Shechina. Or another one is, and this is an interesting one, from Shemot chapter 26, verse 8, V'shechanti b'tocham, and I will dwell within them. Shechanti, dwell, it's that word Shechina, I will dwell within them. So meaning to say within them, it's like this reference to the heart that's within the person. So what does this mean? What does this mean that the Shechina is the heart? So we know that the Shechina, the word Shechina means to dwell, like an indwelling. So this means, like very literally, why is it called the indwelling? Because the Shechina force, it dwells within the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya in order to vitalize them, right? Because remember that Shechina, it comes from Malchus of it's the word Shechina is synonymous with the term Malchus of Atzilus, the Malchus level of the world of Atzilus. So Atzilus, again, is this like very high world that's sort of like different than all the other worlds because it's merely an emanated world. God is totally revealed within that world. But the Shechina is that lowest part of the world that allows that world to connect with the worlds below it, the Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And it vitalizes these worlds. And this vitality, how does the flow of the vitality issue forth from the world of Atzilus, from the Shechina, into these three lower worlds, which is like all the worlds, including the world that we know? It does this through first becoming vested in the souls of the Jewish people. Okay, so now that's interesting. Why does it have to become vested within the souls of the Jewish people? So this is because all of the different types of creation, meaning everything, not the souls of the Jewish people, everything else, everything in the world, they all are nothing compared to God. Like they all are considered as if not in comparison to God. And thus they would not be able to receive this vitality because it's too foreign to them. Like it has nothing to do with them. Like it's not like, it's like God's light and then creation. It's like, what's the connection kind of? So the way that this happens, the mediator for this, the intermediary for this flow of vitality is the souls of the Jewish people. And why? What's so special about the souls of the Jewish people? So it's because the Jewish people are unique in the sense that they rose up in God's thought. And so the origin of our souls is from God's thought. And our souls actually preceded the creation of all the worlds, which all of the worlds were created through God's speech, right? As we spoke about many times, that God speaks the world into creation. And so it's actually taught that God consulted with the souls of the Jewish people before creating the world. So this really shows that there's this precedent that the souls of the Jewish people have. And again, as is known in the gates, he again uses that terminology. We know that any flow that comes from above to below, there's this principle of Na'utz tchilatan besofan, vesofan betchilatan. That's a teaching from Sefer Yetzirah, which means that the beginning is wedged in the end, and the end is wedged in the beginning. So there's a circular aspect to this. So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? So we'll see that this relates to the flow. So if we're saying that there's this flow that's coming from the Shechina through us and down into the world, there's going to be an upward flow as well, paralleling to that. And the Alter Rebbe says that this is also alluded to in the teachings of the Arizal, where the Arizal referred to these two types of flows as Or Yashar, a straight light, which is the downward flow, and then the Or Choser, the return light, which is the upward flow. Or also another type of reference to this is this idea of Ratzo v'shov. This is a term that comes up a lot in Chassidus, this idea of running and returning. The original origin of this is in Yechezkel chapter 1 verse 14. In the vision of Yechezkel, when he saw the chariot, he saw these animals, these chayos, they're called, or creatures that were running and returning. And this is an allusion to the same idea, that there's this movement, that anything that flows downwards, this flow of energy downwards, is going to have a source back up. It's going to flow back upwards. And we talked about this in terms of the physical heart and the organs when we looked at that metaphor, that we talked about also that the blood, the vitality that flows through the blood of the heart, goes from the heart to all the different organs, and then it returns back to the heart. So there's a circular motion in this sense as well. And so here too, when we go to the analog, what it is that we're actually talking about spiritually, when we talk about the souls, so same thing, that the souls, so it's like, okay, God's vitality through the Shechina flows through the souls, but then we see that this teaches us that the souls are actually connected to God, and there's a circulation process that happens where it's the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning is wedged in the end, so that everything can then be connected back to God. And we see that there was an allusion to this when we all stood at the mountain on Har Sinai, where it was taught in Devarim chapter 29 verse 9, where it says, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokechem. You're all standing firm this day before God your Lord. And so the Alter Rebbe is going to break this down a little bit, where it says kulchem, meaning all of you. So like the simple reading of that text is just like, okay, we were all sitting in front of Har Sinai, all together in front of God. But if you actually look at it, like if you look at the words a little bit more closely, you'll see a couple of things. First thing is that it says kulchem, it specifies kulchem, all of you, meaning to say that there was a certain type of unity going on. Everybody was united together and sitting in front of the mountain. And then it says lifnei, before God your God. So it's not only that it was just like we were sitting there in front of the mountain, but there's this idea of before. In front of also means before. In Hebrew, lifnei is in front of, and also before, which means we were before God, before the Yud Kei Vav Kei, meaning that we were sitting in a state of unity that preceded the level of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that preceded the level of the revelation of God. It's a level that is beyond transcendence even, and the Chumash goes on and it says that this is really everybody was there. It was from the highest souls and the lowest souls. It was both the heads of the Jewish people, Roshechem, and also Chotzei Veitzecha, the choppers of wood. So meaning to say, it's like this experience we had on Mount Sinai was when all the Jews were united together, and this unification together allowed us to return back to our source in this place that preceded the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So it's like really to picture this kind of like circular motion going on, this circulation, just like in the body. A healthy body is when the vitality flows from the heart into the organs and then back to the heart. So too, spiritual health is when the vitality flows from the Shechina into the souls of the Jewish people. And when the souls of the Jewish people are all united and there's no blockage there, that will allow this flow to go back to the Shechina itself, meaning to say that we will be able to connect back to our source, which is in this place that precedes the Yud Kei Vav Kei, in this place that's like the origin of all. And now we can understand this idea that why was it that the reason for the destruction of the Second Temple and for the Jews going into exile, and for the Shechina being drawn down into Edom, as it was taught into a state of exile as well. This all came about because of baseless hatred and because of the discord in the hearts of the Jewish people. So now we can understand this, right? Because it's like when there's discord amongst the Jewish people, that's like it's creating a state of imbalance. It's creating something that shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be discord amongst the Jewish people. The Jewish people should be united. We should all love each other and be unified, and this allows for a free-flowing circulation of that vitality, just like the blood circulates through the body when the body is healthy. But if there is discord, God forbid, this creates a blockage, and then and now we can understand why it is that in the state of exile that we're living in now, the Shechina is called ailing, it's called chole, it's called sick. And through this, we can understand the deeper meaning of something that we say in davening every day in the Shmoneh Esrei prayer, where we say, Somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, that God supports those who have fallen, it heals those who are sick. And this is written in the plural. Like, it doesn't just say like God heals a person who is sick or lifts up a person who fell. It's in the plural. So why is it in the plural? Is because this is a spiritual reference to all of the organs. So meaning to say that it's not just about healing the particular individual or whatever. It's about like all the organs need to be healthy, and just like physically all the organs need to be healthy, spiritually too, all the souls need to be healthy. And what this means is that there needs to be a connection between the souls. There needs to be love and unity amongst the Jewish people. So it's a really beautiful message, and that's the end of this epistle. And so I'll leave you with that thought to really increase in your love and connection with your fellow Jew. So hopefully you can find a way today to connect with your fellow Jew in a new way, in a deeper way, and to have this awareness that when in doing so, you're actually you're unblocking the energy of the world. You're actually unblocking the spiritual energy of the Shechina, and you're allowing the vitality and the flow to flow through the souls of the Jewish people, and ultimately to the entire universe, ultimately to allow the universe to heal. Because when the Shechina is healthy and when the Jewish souls are healthy, then this makes the world healthy, and this is what ultimately will bring the redemption to the world. So that's it for today, and tomorrow, so exciting, we are learning the last epistle in Iggeres HaKodesh, so stay tuned, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shechina. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.